welcome to Commander Central episode 110. Today we're going to talk a little bit about GP Kansas City and reflect on our decks that we played there and what things worked, what things didn't, and what things we want to change. I'm Dana.
I'm Max.
And there's no Kris because he didn't go, so we didn't invite him to the show.
Well, let's be clear. We were going to try to do this in Kansas City.
We were, yes. And it wasn't that we didn't invite Kris. He had plans because we were gone this weekend.
Right. But we just stayed up till the wee hours of every morning playing Commander every night. So
we did.
We kind of decided to play games to talk about versus talking about the games we might play.
Very astute way to describe it.
Yes. I need sleep.
So we're going to record. This is going to be a relatively short show since we're just recording it Sunday nights. We can have something out for the listeners on Monday. And I don't think we're going to have a Thursday show this week either for that same reason, because this weekend was nutso and we just don't have time.
Right.
So we'll be back with the usual rotation next week. I believe a Modern Horizon set review a week from when this airs.
Yep.
And then back to the usual deck tech rotation on Thursday.
Awesome.
Excellent. All right. First, let's talk about Kansas City and the people we met there while we were playing.
Well, let's start with your other podcast.
The other as they call this show as well.
So we finally got to meet, specifically you got to meet your co-hosts of the EDH Recast, Joey Schultz and Matt Morgan, in person.
For the first time in person.
That's exciting.
Yeah, it was. And we recorded a show there because Joey is much more goal-driven perhaps than I am, and he was really like, we have to record something in person, whereas on this show we were like, let's just play some games.
Yeah, yep,
so
for sure.
Joey did get us to record a show at midnight or something.
Last night.
So Matt and Joey and I did one for the EDH Recast, but that was really, really cool meeting them in person. I had never met them before after a year of recording, and Max had also been interacting with them for quite a while for the same reasons, and so you got to meet them as well. So that was awesome.
Yes, thanks again to Matt for getting the hotel put together and, showing us around the hometown and whatnot. Yeah,
that was, I don't know, it was just a really, really great weekend, even ignoring the Magic aspect of it, hanging out with those two, everyone all together. We got to meet a bunch of Matt's friends. We got to meet Joey's friend Kris. It was Andrew Cummings,
who was a writer at EDH
Rec, and a friend of Matt's in real life was there. It was amazing just from that level, ignoring how many awesome games of Magic we had to eat and how many ginormous plates of brisket and pulled pork we got to consume.
Yum.
Yeah, it was a great time.
Yeah.
We also got to meet a ton of listeners.
Yeah, so let's give a huge shout out to Michael. He actually lives in Kansas City.
Yes, yep.
Hung out with us pretty much the whole weekend.
I was there Friday and Saturday for both days, and played a ton of Commander.
Played a ton of Commander. He has a couple cool decks. Helped him kind of get started on his Enchantress deck. That was fun.
Yeah, he kept making trips over and coming back like, hey, look, I got my Sanctum. I got my whatever. So he stockpiled cards for that deck all weekend. Joshua Swope, listener and pretty prolific Twitter poster for a bunch of different Commander groups, was there with his wife kind of on a vacation weekend away from their newborn children.
Yes. Her name was Amber, I believe.
Yes. I had to play multiple games with both of them.
Yes. Lots of fun decks and good stories from those.
Yes. Robert is a listener, goes by Pen Unbroken, I think, on Twitter.
Yes.
I got to play at least one game with him, and I think you did too.
I did as well.
And I've forgotten, there's at least, there was Thor and his friend whose name I forgot. It was so many people, like, I feel like a jerk for forgetting so many names, but I probably played with 20 different people that listened to one of the two shows or both shows. I just can't, it was such a whirl of names and Magic and brisket that I just can't, that I've just forgotten, and I really apologize.
Yeah.
I played just great games, and almost every person I interacted with was amazing.
Yeah. At the last moment on Saturday night before we left to go get dinner, I bumped into listener Thomas Schillett, I believe is his name. I apologize again. Like Dana said, we met so many people, played so many games, but I got to meet you in person, and I apologize we didn't get to play a game with you, but it was nice meeting you, and thank you for snapping the picture of me with you in the event center.
Yeah. Thank you very much. I think I had just left before that, so I missed him. It was just super, super cool to see everyone, and we thank you for taking time out of your busy Magic Fest weekend to come say hi to us.
Yes, we totally appreciate it.
So let's talk for a few minutes now, Max, about the decks we played when we were there. So we always try to do a little bit of learning here when we do this show, and let's reflect upon 30 plus games or so of EDH we cranked out over the course of the weekend?
Yeah, I think I played close to 30. I know you for sure passed me.
I could look up my log. I didn't do it before we started recording. I can look it up and verify that. But I was over 20 at one point when I counted. I'm probably close to 30.
Yeah.
So let's start with you. Your Dromoka deck. You played multiple games with that with a different meta than you're used to.
Yes.
Or at least maybe even a non-meta because it was so many different people from different places. How did Dromoka perform?
Dromoka crapped all over me like a flock of birds.
That's apropos considering it's a flying tribal deck.
I pulled that out of my butt.
Yes, whenever I saw you play it, except for the very final game you played last night, it was struggling.
Very much so.
So what do you think were the causes of those struggles?
One, it is a slow deck, and I tend to play it like an aggro deck. So,
okay.
In the wild, I saw a lot of dictate-like effects out in the wild. A lot of, sacrifice a creature, everybody does, which really slows down your deck when you revolves around your commander. Or maybe having 1 or 2 creatures out at a time that each cost 5 mana.
So you've played a Baneslayer and you've played Dromoka, and someone casts a Fleshlight Marauder, and you then have to choose to sacrifice one of those 2 creatures. Then the turn passes to you, and now you're like, okay, I can swing at somebody, I guess.
Yep.
Leaving me wide open, or I can just do a thing and ramp a card and pass a turn. That makes things challenging when you're dealing with enough edicts in a deck that's got 18 creatures, all of which cost 4 to 6 mana.
Yep. On top of the 2 other players in that pod that are realizing like, oh, you just have a bunch of flyers, I'll hit you with a bunch of goblin tokens.
Sure. So we talked about this a little bit on the drive back home. So what are your plans to try to bandage that wound a little bit?
So like Dana said, the last game that I played Dromoka, which was the last game of my weekend.
At 1 in the morning on Saturday night.
On Saturday night. It was about an hour and a half
Sunday
long
morning,
game.
Technically.
I played that way more control-y. I played almost every Wrath in my deck, and just 1 spell per turn is literally what I focused on.
So your goal is to control the game and grind things out until you were in a position to then smack people to death with 2 or 3 big creatures.
And a true conviction.
Yes.
Yep. So, as we discussed in the car on the way home, I think that's the route I need to take this deck, both for our local meta and to play it out in the wild at Magic Fest Minneapolis or Magic Fest Vegas.
Basically, you want to play Selesnya Control almost.
Yep. So I'm actually going to swap out a couple of the lower costed creatures for a couple more Wrath effects, whether it's the new overloaded path from Modern Horizons that we'll be talking about next week.
Or even just like Day of Judgment because it's cheap.
Yep, a Day of Judgment, or even like a Citywide Bust or something like that.
Sure.
That will help that deck a lot, and knowing some of the changes I will be putting in there come Modern Horizons, I think that'll help the overall flow of the deck.
So it's twofold. You're going to change it a little bit in the composition to more of a control build, and you're going to change how you play it.
Yes.
Because oftentimes you try to race, because the deck does ramp pretty hard.
Very hard.
And you try to race out with Dromoka, and occasionally that's just enough because no one has an answer in hand. But you think, I agree, you'll be more consistent if you play it slower and let other people race ahead, punish them for it with your Wraths, and then mop up afterwards with those big beaters once they've emptied their hands out.
Yeah, especially when you look at my creature count, 75% of my creatures have lifelink, so I can afford to take
a few hits and you can
a
rebuild.
lot of hits, and then
absolutely,
when the time is right, drop my lifelinkers and start gaining some life back.
And to a degree, that's how my Sphinx deck plays.
Exactly.
It's a slow, grinding game. I can afford to take some hits, earn the lifelink back, and then close the game out with control and big beaters in the air.
Very true.
All right. That sounds like a plan.
So let's talk about your Recce deck now, Dana.
My Recce deck, okay. One thing I want to avoid is getting too specific because a couple of the cards I didn't love are ones that we're going to touch on probably next month sometime when we talk about War of the Spark cards and kind of review a few of those. So I will keep things general versus talking about specific cards. The problem I'm having right now, and I still won
quite a bit of games with it.
I'd have to look. I bet I played the deck 6 times, and I think I won 3 of the 6 games I played with it.
That's not bad.
That's better than what you should expect from a deck, so that's fine. I have a few pockets in the deck, I think, where I need more creatures, just because the creatures draw me a card that is hopefully a creature that draws me a card, and I can get that kind of feedback loop going where I just create an overwhelming board state that I hopefully have haste with and I can kill someone or everyone with. So I think a few of the things I've tweaked and added have reduced my creature count to a density slightly lower than what I need to consistently get that loop going. So I'm going to probably try to find a way to knock that back up and add 1 or 2 more creatures back in. And then as a backup plan, I think I need a touch more draw to, again, smooth over those gaps. One of the cards I added replaced Oath of Nissa, which isn't like a draw spell necessarily, but in that deck it kind of is. It's 1 mana, draws me a card because it's a legend. So if Recce's out, it's a 1 mana draw spell.
Yep.
And it lets you look at the top 3 cards of your library and put a land, creature...
Or Planeswalker
into your hand. In that deck, that's,
going to hit every time.
So it's basically winds up being a 1 mana draw 2.
Yes.
So I think that's going to go back in. That's just too efficient to not have in the deck. So I think I just need to make a few little tweaks like that are going to help maybe smooth over a few of the rough edges that I noticed playing the deck so many times this weekend.
So it's almost like some of the changes you have been making in the past few months maybe aren't good. And like you said, we'll probably reflect on those when we do our War of the Spark review.
We'll get into some specific cards when we do the War of the Spark thing. Because I have been happy with several of them. I've added like 3 or 4 new cards to that deck. I'm happy with 2 of the 4, and I'm unhappy with, 1 or 2 of the... Yeah. So we'll go into some specifics on a later show, but that was what I noticed with that deck.
Yes.
How about Brago, say, for you?
Brago, so we discussed this on the way home. Brago is a deck where I don't mind if I don't win.
Sure.
I just want to do kind of cool things. So
it's a deck that's fiddly and interesting enough where even if you lose, you've done a bunch of things and got a satisfying play experience even without the win.
Yes. I mean, our listeners know Out in the Wild kind of assumes because it's a Brago deck.
Yep.
They just know most of the time that deck is going to win by a lock of some sort, locking the game down. And that's how it won both times. I just locked it out with an Archaeomancer, Panharmonicon, and a Wrath and a Eerie Interlude, essentially.
Okay.
The cards I've added, such as the new Teferi from War and new Narset, we'll get more into this again, but those are all stars.
They've been great. Yep. Okay.
So Brago performed decent, what I'd expect. There were some games where I never saw the key pieces to do the cool things.
Right.
Which happens. You can't do anything about that. But then there were also games where I got to do all the really cool things that I love to do with Brago, and people like to see it happen, and then we scooped and started a new game.
Okay.
So I'm content with how Brago is. I think there's some changes coming from Modern Horizons I might add, but otherwise it's still where I like it to be.
Good.
So you have let's do Glissa.
I only played Glissa once.
And that was with Matt and Joey, just because it's your deck.
Yep, and I didn't get to see much. It was a relatively quick game. I didn't get to see much there. So I think the one I'll mention next is my Crash deck.
Okay.
I tried to play that quite a bit this weekend. It's also a newer deck in my rotation.
Okay.
My observations on that over the course of playing it again, probably half a dozen games, it's a little too slow. I don't think it's overly reliant on Crash. Crash is a component of it, but I don't need him out to win. I won a couple different games with like with multiple flings, or I won at least one with a big Chandra's Ignition, although I think that was on the Crash. But the deck functions without Crash being out. The problem is there isn't always a lot to do on turns 1, 2, 3, even 4 sometimes.
Right.
I also think I need a little more ramp. And I'm not sure. I think here's the problem with that deck. If you want to build a deck and you want to put, your 36 or 37 lands into it, and you want to put 20 creatures, and you want to put 10 pieces of ramp and 10 pieces of draw and 10 pieces of removal, and, the usual kind of suite that you're roughly trying to do in a deck, that doesn't leave room for 10 fling cards.
No.
Particularly when I'm looking at, I also want Doubling Season and Hardened Scales and like stuff to enable my deck. It's just a deck that has 110 cards. That it needs to have 110 cards to function, and I don't have room for 110 cards. So I've kind of I'm not going to go. I'm running 5 pieces of ramp instead of 10, and I'm running a little less removal than I would normally run. I think I only have 2 board wipes instead of 3 or 4.
Yeah.
So I haven't found the balance yet. Because there's decks I have where I've been willing to sacrifice things and say, okay, this deck is trying to do a complicated thing. I just don't get to run board wipes, or I just don't get to run, like my Vela deck. I just don't get to run counterspells in that deck.
Right.
I have too many things the deck wants to do, and yes, it'd be great to have 3 or 4 counterspells in there. I'm just not going to run any, and I've just made that decision.
Okay.
And that's fine. That's the deck's weakness. That's okay. So I need to figure out what I'm going to sacrifice in that Crush deck. And I don't quite know what it is. Because it won plenty of games. Again, I think I won at least two games. I know I won two for sure. Again, if I played 6 or 7, that's a great win rate. I'm happy with that.
Right.
But it's still a little bit clunky. It's fun to play. I'm definitely going to keep it now. It's probably officially made the canon of decks I want to have around. But it's not as smooth as I would like, and it's because I haven't figured out the ratio of
the goal and to get you there.
Because I just have to play the deck the way I want to play it. I have to have 8 or 9 or 10 slots sucked up by Thud and Fling and Essence Harvest and Soul's Fire and whatever spells that do that thing I want. So that just means I'm playing a 90 card deck essentially to get me to that position, and I haven't figured out the balance yet. So that's what I'm going to kind of post-mortem on my own to look at. I know what the problem is. Now I need to figure out how to address it.
Okay.
How about you? What was your third deck you played the most you want to talk about?
Regnan Krav.
R&K. Okay.
R&K. R&K, you have those games where you just get flooded. That happened quite a bit.
I do have one solution for that deck right away I will mention. If you could be Joey Schultz.
Oh, geez. Don't get me started.
Who test played your deck once and blew up.
Yeah, fast.
Quickly. He blew up with it, and it blew up quickly.
Yes.
That would have solved a lot of problems.
It would. I just got to be Joey Schultz. I'll work on that for Vegas.
Thanks, man.
No, it functions fine. I haven't made a lot of modifications to it since War came out, and we'll talk about that, in the future.
Right.
But you know what? When it does its thing, it does its thing.
Okay.
It actually was probably my best deck in a lot of the decks we played against were Marin decks or Lord Windgrace decks, where it was a lot of, Grave Pack type effects.
And that you bounce it off that. You have no problem with that.
Krav will I'll sack it, or Krav will eat something. The deck played well. I had a very good 2-hour game with it on Saturday. It was a very interactive game.
It was a long game, but there was a ton of stuff happening in that game.
Yes, it did not feel like 2 hours until it finally ended and we realized we'd been playing for 2 hours.
Right.
So, R&K, I think, the mana base could probably be tweaked a little bit just to make it smoother. And I could probably use maybe a mana rock or 2 more, but I don't know what to cut. But I think it kind of has your Crush problem. It's almost there, but not quite.
And it's also kind of similar to the Crush deck. Those are 2 of our newer decks in the pool. Comparing them to the decks that we've had for 3 or 4 years that we've had that long to tweak, obviously they're going to be a little rougher.
Very true.
So a lot of this is, in both those cases, is these decks are going to just be smoother in a year than they are now by virtue of tinkering this whole time. So if we look back, I bet a lot of those problems will just kind of work themselves out via us adding a piece here or there and making a few changes.
Yep. Did you play Sphinxes at all this week?
I played Sphinxes once.
Okay.
And I won the game. I did this usual Sphinx. It played exactly like it's supposed to, where everyone's like, oh man, things are going rough, because you can't cast anything. I'm like, yeah, it's terrible playing Sphinxes. What am I going to do? By the way, I'm going to counterspell that, and now I've got 3 Sphinxes in play, and it's turn 10, and you guys are all super, super screwed.
Yeah.
And that worked like it's supposed to work, and I won the game with it, and that was just fine.
Perfect. What other decks did you play a lot?
I played my Vela deck quite a bit.
That's right.
I've been playing that deck a lot in general because I like it and it's weird and it's fun, and it's not necessarily that great and it's never going to be amazing, but it's fun and it wins enough that I'm satisfied with it. I again enjoyed it. It wins games in different ways really, really consistently.
Yeah.
I think I played it 4 or 5 times. I know I won 1 game. The game I won, I did it by, first of all, killing 1 person with...
The new Tezzeret?
With a bunch of... I nailed people with a new Tezzeret first. Then I killed somebody else with a bunch of animated artifacts.
Yep.
And then I was able to finish somebody off, actually it was Joey, with a Aetherflux Reservoir that I copied with a Mirage Mirror. After you copied his, that was a whole thing. And Joey explains on EDH Trackcast, if you want to listen, it was a whole series of back and forths where there were 2 copies of Aetherflux Reservoir in play at one point in time.
And everybody had enough life to fire the cannon. That was the best part.
It was very much, yeah, right. It was very much the kind of Reservoir Dogs, everyone's pointing a gun at somebody else standoff from the end of the movie.
Lord.
And I won that standoff.
Yes, you did.
So that deck played pretty well. I drew the Elder Spell 3 times in the deck. The first 2 times I didn't have a Planeswalker out, but it didn't matter. There was juicy targets in play, and I was happy with it. The 3rd time there was 2 or 3 Planeswalkers in play that weren't mine, and I had my own. So I was able to kill all the Planeswalkers and put 6 counters on Tezzeret. That felt really good. But I felt fine casting it the previous 2 times, even without a Planeswalker of my own, just killing. Once killed a Narset, and one of them killed an Amanatu, I believe, that was someone's commander, or it might have been a Windgrace.
But still.
Either way, the Elder Spell I've been very happy with. Again, that's anecdotal evidence in like 5 games. But I would say this, in that deck, I have not once drawn the Elder Spell and wished it was something else.
And that is exactly the type of card you want in an EDH deck.
Yes. So I'm still trying to figure out what to do with that deck. There's a new enchantment that we'll talk about for Modern Horizons, a blue one that I'm really digging. So we'll discuss that next week. That'll probably go in there. I'm going to look. I wish I had ways to make tokens quicker and more reliably.
Yeah.
Because the deck likes having multiple small things in play to either sacrifice to Vela or to use to turn into 5/5 artifacts or whatever. So yeah. I'm going to do a little bit of deep digging and see if I can find something else useful to add to the deck. But overall, I'm happy enough with that deck considering how limiting it kind of is.
Yeah.
So those were the main ones for me. Was there anything else for you?
I have one last one.
What's your last one?
To Vasa the Sunlit.
Oh, that's right. Your newest deck.
My newest deck, as in, like, it's been together for a week when this airs.
Yeah, like literally a week.
Yeah. So I sleeved it up, took it with me. I did one playtest at our LGS before we left. It did fine. Brought it down there, and Enchantress is fun.
Yes.
That's all I gotta say. It needs a few... I think a Sigarda does need to go in there just to protect against some sacrifice outlets.
Because that deck is especially vulnerable to an Edict, for sure.
I don't run a lot of Wraths. I don't run a lot of counter spells. It's just... I think I have 23 3-drops in that deck.
That's a lot of 3-drops.
But it's been super consistent. I really haven't tuned it much. I bought a Retrace and a Serra Sanctum for it.
Okay.
And those really are the only 2 additions I did in the deck since I put it together.
So it's really kind of your first draft here.
Yeah. Maybe like version 2, because I think I did make like 6 cuts based on the people on our Slack, some recommendations before we left. I said, hey, I want to put these cards in. What should I cut? And I just made the cuts on the fly. And they're like, yeah, that seems right. But I'm very impressed with how it works. I actually won a game with just a suited up Core Spirit Dancer.
Nice.
That is how, Tuvasa costs like 6-7 to cast. I'm like, I don't need her. I'm just going to do this.
Well, hey, being able to win without your commander available is really, really useful in a deck as well.
Yes.
So
I'm super happy with that deck. That will for sure always be in my rotation going forward.
Cool. It always feels good to add a new permanent deck that you feel like, this deck is so much fun, I want to keep it and take the next step now.
Yep. It definitely, I think I've said this in past episodes. I love green-white, I love blue-white, but I haven't really found a Bant deck that kind of melded the two, and I think this is finally where I feel the happy middle ground of Azorius meets Celestia.
Nice.
Yeah.
Cool. Good to hear. All right. That's going to wrap up this little short show here on Monday. We'll be back next week with our full Modern Horizons set review. Our podcast theme is Retro Future Dirty by Kevin MacLeod, and our show is edited by Ken Peddle. You can find him on Twitter at LOAD3R. You can find me on Twitter at Dana Roach. You can find Max at CMDR_Max. And Kris you can find at WiseSquishy1. Until next time, I'm Dana.
And I'm Max.